Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Lori Rubin. I am with Mylio Photos along with Angela Andrew, and we are here to introduce our wonderful friend here, Allison Freedman. She is a certified photo organizer who has successfully completed the Mylio Photos Certified Consultants Program. Her diverse background includes a past life as an attorney and as an amateur nature photographer. So that's very interesting, having that attorney background. What truly sets her apart is her entrepreneurial endeavor, which is Arrange, Wander, Focus, where she blends her passion for photography and organizational skills she learned during her legal career. So during this webinar, we'll go ahead and dive into Allison's world as she shares her expertise in helping clients curate and organize their genealogy photos. And her mission is to help empower individuals to bring all their photos together into a single organized repository to help preserve cherished memories, but also makes them accessible everywhere. So thank you, Allison, for joining us today, and we look forward to your presentation.
Thank you, Lori. Thank you for having me. I assume if you can't hear me okay, you'll speak up in the chat. I am just going to share my screen here. And okay, hopefully everybody can see my screen, and I'm sure you'll tell me if you won't. Lori and Angela. Yep. Okay. Yep. So there we go. That's me. And I'm excited to be here today. This will be really fun for me. Combining a bunch of passions doing this talk. So let's dive right in. I am Allison Freedman. My business is Arrange, Wander, Focus. A little bit about me, a little bit extra. As Lori mentioned, I am a certified photo organizer. What does that mean? It means that I deal with photos all day long, every day. I clean out people's libraries, I scan prints, I scan negatives, I convert videos, all of that stuff, download from everywhere, and just help people enjoy their memories. I am also an amateur nature photographer. I'm a semi-dedicated birder. I go out whenever I can, and so I have a lot of bird photos in my library. And I am a genealogy enthusiast, which is why I am here doing this talk for you today. So what do all these things have in common? Lots and lots and lots of photos. Just tons of photos in different types of buckets, different types of photos. I will preface my talk today by saying that while I am a photo organizing expert, I am not a genealogy expert, but I have come up with workflows based on my experience as a photo organizer and my own genealogy research that have really helped me keep things in order and organized. So that is what I would like to share with you. Today's talk has several different parts. Each one of them could probably be their own hour-long talk, but don't worry, won't be here for the rest of the day. So I'm going to show you first how my library is organized at Mylio, because when I have watched coffee breaks and other speakers, I am weirdly fascinated by how other people set up their libraries. So I'm going to give you a little bit of an insight there, a bit about the printed Ancestry images that you might have that you want to bring into your library and into your research, how I bring in both the digital and the prints into my library and handle them in the exact same way, how to handle the metadata that you are going to want to add to your photos. And at the very end, one tip that has helped me enormously keep everybody straight. Genealogy can quickly rack up a whole lot of people, and sometimes I kind of forget who they are, especially on my husband's side. So one great tip at the end, at least I think it's a great tip. So starting off with my Mylio library, like I said, I love to see how other people do it. So this is what I do. And just before I go there, actually, I'm only showing screenshots today because my library is full of client photos, client product, my own family, all sorts of very personal information because I use it for everything. And I not only am a certified photo organizer, but I'm also a privacy advocate. And the thought of some of that stuff going out on a live webinar and then on YouTube kind of creeps me out a little bit. So I am only using screenshots, but I think you'll still be able to see what I have going on. So everything, turn on my little laser here, everything that I have goes into Mylio, and my top level looks probably like all of yours. Well, maybe not cowtails, which somebody just gave me a bag of, and that is my Apple Photos library there. But everything goes in. So it's work photos, screenshots, ideas that I have that I take pictures of, documents. Second bucket, big bucket that we'll talk about are ancestry photos and documents. And then, of course, literally everything else. So at the top, I've got my Apple Photos from my phone coming in, my inbox, which I will talk about a lot. And then the media, which is literally everything else that I have in Mylio. So the way my workflow works with Mylio, it works similarly no matter where the photos are coming from. So for example, my Apple Photos that are coming from my phone into that Apple top folder, what happens, they come in, I delete probably 70% of them. I add captions or keywords or do whatever I want to the rest. And then I throw them all into my photos by year folder, which is my personal folder of everything. And it is exactly like it sounds. It is by year, by month folders. And one reason I do that, even though it's probably unnecessary in Mylio, is because before I started using Mylio, that's how everything was structured. And that is how my brain works. I'm a very chronological thinker. So I leave it that way. I do the exact same thing with my inbox. So my inbox gets all of my genealogy documents and photos as they come in, and we'll go through that. But I process them from the inbox, and then I move them into this Ancestry folder here, which actually has two folders in it. One is Ancestry Documents, and one is Ancestry Photos. The Ancestry photos that go into the Ancestry folder are actually the photos that I don't really want in my life calendar. They're probably far off relatives that I don't really know, or from the other side of the family, maybe. The photos that I actually like to keep, people that I'm close to that would qualify also as Ancestry photos, may also end up in my photos by year. And then I have a few other random things here. I have a documents folder, which I keep separate because I don't like them showing in my calendar. I have a reference folder, which will come into play a little bit later. And this is literal reference. So the picture on the front here is actually a reference guide to warblers that migrate in my area. So it's literally a photo of warbler heads and butts that I can pull up when I am out in the field trying to figure out what something is. I have a work folder, which I keep separate. This is where all my client work is. Again, separate so that it doesn't show in my library. And then a temp folder, which is everything that comes in through my DSLR. And I treat it the same way as my Apple folder. I download off the card into this temporary folder. I delete 90%. I caption and keyword and name and everything the rest, and then they end up in here. And then I have one other small folder, which is undated photos. I know that they show in the library clearly, but I am still a folder girl. It's the way I think. So I have a folder of undated photos. It's a little bit of a to-do list. It reminds me that I need to figure out when these photos were taken. Okay. Oh, I also, sorry, one more thing is I have started to use categories. So initially I was all about folders, but I had actually a conversation with Angela at some point, and she said, you should really be using categories. So I've started to use categories, and this is what I do use: travel, which is I have a lot of travel photos because it's a passion, work, Ancestry, which will be helpful later. And this one also Master Ancestry Photo category, which I will talk about at the very end. So going into genealogy, now you know my overall setup. This genealogy is actually a newer hobby for me, so I wouldn't be at all surprised if many of you watching know more about genealogy research than I do. But my interest started when I realized that I am a photo organizer who spends my day going through boxes and terabytes of data for clients who have all of these photos of their family, of their grandparents, great grandparents, and beyond. And I realized I have a very, very small, paltry collection of old family photos. So my interest was piqued. I tried to go find some. I started doing some research, and then I discovered some of the stories that I grew up with weren't exactly what I thought they were, which made me even more curious. So I just kept going from there. And I'm now hooked and really enjoy the genealogy side of the research and finding out all of the relationships and all of the stories. I am also an organization geek, which is, why I'm actually here giving this talk today, because it's mostly about how I organize all of the stuff that I find. So where do I find my photos and records? Two primary sources: physical photos, which, as I just mentioned, I don't have a ton. This is one. This is me when I am about, I don't know, 3-ish, and my grandfather in Florida. So physical photos make up a small part, and then the rest are things that I download from websites. So Ancestry and Family Search are the two I use the most. Newspapers.com has a lot of information. And then I have a whole bunch of other places that I look listed here. I also have a bunch of Canadian sites, because that's the other side of our family. And one thing I just learned recently that I thought might be helpful for those of you who do a lot of genealogy research is that if you have a National Archives facility near you, you can actually go in and log into ancestry.com for free. So little tip if you happen to be in the DC area, or I'm not sure where their other ones are, but I did not know that. So I was excited to figure that out. I don't do a whole lot in person. So everything is coming from the web, or, collections that just show up or I find in a basement somewhere. So I'm just going to spend a couple minutes talking about the printed photos, because, all of the stuff, like I said, most of my stuff comes in digital already, but digital images were not popular until the 1980s, really the late 1980s. So anything from my childhood, my parents, and beyond started as a print photo, and need to be digitized in order to come in to, live with the rest of your library. So if you are lucky enough to have some of these older family photos in your collection, I urge you to take the time to have them scanned properly, because there is a lot you can do with them if you can get a proper scan. And I'll show you the difference between a good scan and a bad scan in a minute. But one of the things that is super helpful if you have printed photos that are scanned well is you can restore them. And so this is just a quick plug for, if you have the ability, use a flatbed scanner. Even better yet, use a camera scan setup. This one here is showing negatives, but I do prints and slides and pretty much everything with this setup, because it gives you a lot more ability to restore photos and get some of the detail back that you might have lost if you take a bad scan. And I would be remiss as a photo organizer if I did not say, when you're handling these old photos, please wear gloves, because the oils from your fingers will damage them. Why am I spending time on this? Because if you get a good quality scan, you can clean it up. So you can take this photo with all the writing. This is an engagement photo, we think from 1933, of my grandfather, who was in that past slide, and my grandmother. And I was able to restore all of the, take all the writing off, restore the rip that was on this side. When I looked at it closely, I did realize this actually says proof, and this actually says, please return proofs, which, you know, clearly that did not happen because I have the photo. But even after restored, I actually keep both in my library. And the reason is there may be stuff on this one that I will need later on. The photographer's name is actually on the back of this one. And I don't know, that could come in useful at some point. So I keep them both. One more reason is good scans can bring damaged images back to life. So this is a silvered photo, which happens with age for photos that are not stored properly. But with a little bit of TLC and Photoshop and a little bit of skill, you can get this kind of image out of it. And again, why is that important? Well, I like it for my library to have good scanned images, but also if you are doing research and you want to upload your images to an Ancestry site, Ancestry or Family Search or one of the others, people will really appreciate if you upload this one and not this one. So here's another example. These are both photos that I pulled off of, I can't remember if it was Family Search or Ancestry.com, but the difference is striking. This is a terrible scan. This looks a lot like the photos that I've seen from, you know, one side of my family, where they are literally photos that have been Xeroxed, literally an old Xerox machine, and then copied again. And then somebody took a picture and then sent that to somebody else who printed it out on an old dot matrix printer. And I have tons of those, and you can't see any of the detail. You can barely tell who they are. This one, somebody took the time to actually get a good scan and upload that. So we were thrilled when we found this picture online, and this is on my husband's side of, we call him Uncle Bud. He was actually shot down in World War II over Scandinavia. And so we were thrilled to find this photo on, I think it was Family Search. So just a word to please, if you have the ability, take your time with the scans, do a good job, because further researchers and your family will thank you. So going into the actual Ancestry work, and I'm not going to spend a ton of time on this. Most of my time will be how I organize everything that I find. But since almost all of my images and documents come from online sources, I would just want to speak a little bit. And again, everything's blacked out because I just didn't want the names of family and everything splashed all over the internet if I could help it. So if you are in Family Search, which is free, and it's a great site, it's provided by the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. They also have an extensive library in Salt Lake City, where I actually lived for about 7 years when I was doing graduate work. Unfortunately, I wasn't interested in genealogy then, so it was completely wasted, although I was in the library for other reasons. So if you have the ability to go there, I don't know if you're still able to just walk in, but they have an amazing library and they make all of their records free. So once you sort of build out your tree, you'll probably see these little blue pieces of paper with people on them. And that's the way that they show you, okay, we found some records for you to review. So we'll go to one of those records. And this one happened to be a census from, I think it was 1900 for my great grandmother. And I love census documents. They are actually one of my favorite because they tell us a lot of who, what, and where information. So I know occupations, I know immigration status, I know if they've been naturalized, I know who lived in the residence, who lived next door. So I love these documents. A note of caution, I have actually found a lot of incomplete and bad information in them as well. Reason being, at least in my family, many people came to the United States after being persecuted elsewhere. So they did not always tell the truth to the census takers. So when you're looking and you see differences between, especially census documents in dates and things like that, that's probably why. So one of the things that I do is, Family Search gives you all of the information here. Well, it would, if you could look behind my little blue boxes, you would see all the information here, names and ages and all sorts of things, which I always scan, but I always go directly to the document itself. So in Family Search, I always click on the link to open up the actual document, because I just enjoy looking at the original text. I often find things that I might not find in the summary. But I also do that because I like to keep the documents. So I will actually go, and if I look at this document and I find things that I like, that are important to me, information that I want to keep, I will download it. I have nothing against the cloud. I keep all sorts of things in the cloud, but I am also a firm believer that you should be in control of your own photos and documents. And to me, that means that you should have a full copy on site with you, so that if the internet blows up tomorrow, you still have everything. And that might sound kind of funny. I don't think Ancestry.com or Family Search are going anywhere, but I have worked with enough clients who have hired me because they got a notice that whatever photo site they were keeping their stuff with is either no longer free or no longer available, and they have 30 days to get all their stuff out. So I'm a big believer in keeping my own copy, which is one reason I like Mylio so much, because it is stored on my own drives in my own house. I have full control. So when I find these documents on Family Search, I click the little download button and send it into my library. So I send it directly into the Mylio inbox. Do not pass go. Not to my desktop, which is a habit a lot of people have, but I send it right to the inbox, which this is a screen from a Mac. It's similar on Explorer. You just have to scroll down and find where it says Mylio inbox, but it's there. Obviously I changed the name. Image isn't very helpful. And I'll talk later about what I would actually name this document, but I change the name before it's downloaded always, because I can imagine having, 30 documents all named image, all with today's date, because that's how they would download. So before I actually download, I will change the name using a convention I'll discuss later, and then it shows up in my inbox. Quickly, Ancestry is very similar. You build out your tree. It gives you all sorts of suggestions in the little green leaf. I found some very strange ones there. It could be because Freedman is a quite common name with a lot of different spellings. So I see all sorts of things that have nothing to do with my family, but some of them are good. And then I do the same thing. I go into the record and I will download it right from here. You just click on it and you can download it to your screen. And that way you can keep it to your computer. So once you click on it, there's a little save button up here. There's also the wrench on this side can also be used to download, and you just click save to your computer. There it goes to my Mylio inbox. You can see I got a bunch of stuff in there. I don't know if you can actually read that. With another super helpful name, thank you, Ancestry.com. And I will change the name, send it to my inbox. So same exact process. Now, the other thing I will do is normally I try and add all of the source information, where I got it from, as I'm downloading it. And I'll talk about that in a little bit. But if for some reason I'm in a hurry and I can't do that, I will also take a screenshot of this source page. The reason for that is I am a huge, I was a lawyer. I also actually have a master's in anthropology. So I was a researcher, and sources are none of my little things. I always have to know where things come from. But also, if you don't have that, and for some reason you have a question later on and you want to find it, you kind of need the source to do that. So I will if I don't add it right away, I will take a screenshot of the source. It will come into my inbox. I'll save it in the exact same way. It'll come into my inbox, usually right next to the source itself, because it's organized by time, so that I can add that that information later. And then before I actually go into the inbox and what I do there, I will also save that particular source to my timeline. So I will, in Ancestry and Family Search, there's a button you can press and it will add it to, you choose which person, it will add it to their life story, is what they call it in Ancestry, so that you can find it again, so that when you're looking at those sites, you'll know where the information is coming from. But one thing that I do is I will go in and add a mark so that I know I've already downloaded that document. Because if you've done any type of research, there's nothing worse than spending all this time on a new document and then realizing you already have it. And you've already looked through it, you already have all of the information, and you just wasted the last 15 or 20 minutes. So in Ancestry, I go into this edit fact section, which was on the document itself. And in the description, I just add this little check mark. In Family Search, there's a field called the reason this source is attached. And I do the same thing there. I just add a little check mark, and that way I know that I've already looked at it and that I have already downloaded it, and it is now in my library. So then we get to the inbox. And at this point, this is where our printed photos and anything saved from the web merge, because they're all in here in my inbox. And you see this one, I've got a whole ton of documents in here. There's one photo down here, but mostly documents at this point. And once it hits the inbox, this is where the real magic happens, because this is where we get to add all of the really cool information that we know about the photo into the metadata. Metadata is essentially a digital version of the writing on the back of a photo that might have told us the who, the what, the where, the when, sometimes the why, essentially anything that's happening in the photo, when it was taken, what the event was, you know, Easter 1967, whatever it is that we used to write on the back of the photo, we can now add into the metadata of the photo itself. And the nice thing about doing it digitally is we can be much more organized and much more consistent about how we add that information, which is important for searching later on, and a couple other reasons. So anything that I can keep that I learn about the document from the web while I'm still on that site, I will actually put it in here. And then I'll show you where I do that. So in Mylio, the metadata is entered and viewed on the right-hand side in that panel, which if you are familiar with Mylio, I'm sure you've seen. This is a desktop view. On a phone, you just click those three horizontal dots up there at the top on your phone, and it will bring up an info panel, and that's how you get to the same place. All good photo organizing software programs allow you to add metadata. The extent of what you add differs, but they all allow you to add it somewhere. And the really important thing about metadata is it is baked into the photo. So if I were to add a whole bunch of information here, I export it, I open it in Finder or Explorer, I can see all of that information. So it's important to add it properly and to add whatever you have. Mylio gives us two options for doing that, two options for entering the data. The result is exactly the same. So there is in Mylio a family history tab, which was added, I think, at the last update, which when you toggle it on, essentially what that does is it changes the order of the fields that you see and just puts towards the top fields that people doing family research are more likely to use. So things like the title, the description, the people fields, and location, I believe, all rise to the top of this pane. I tend to use that view more when I'm looking at stuff later than when I'm entering, because when I am entering, I almost always start with everything, not Ancestry stuff, but literally everything. I always start with the date and the file name. So I like to see that at the top when I'm entering the data. But when I'm going back to look at stuff, I actually do toggle on the family history because I like having the captions and some of the other things up top. I don't have to scroll down for them. You can use either view. It ends up in the same place. So whatever works best for you is what you should do. So what type of information do you add? You can add literally anything. But before you add anything, it's important to be consistent, especially for certain types of fields, in what and how you are adding the metadata, where you are adding it, and to make a plan. So for example, names alone, how people are named. Are you going to include the maiden names? Are you going to include the married name? Are you going to include nicknames? Are you going to add where the photo was actually taken? Or are you going to add what the photo is actually of? For example, if I'm standing on a cliff, looking out, if I'm standing in Four Corners, for example, and I'm standing on the Utah side and I'm looking into New Mexico, well, I could label that photo the place in a bunch of different ways. So it's really important to think about how you want to do it before you actually start. And there's no right way to do it. There are some guidelines. So I suggest, maybe after we go through these today, it'll give you some ideas, but I suggest creating a cheat sheet for the fields that you are going to use and what your conventions are to keep them straight in your genealogy documents, especially with people names. That is where I think it is most important. So I'm going to talk about a few of mine and what I do. And I actually have at the end, if you'd like, you can download the cheat sheet that I use, which goes through all of the fields, not only the ones here, but some additional ones, and the naming conventions that I use for people, how I handle dates, all of those things you can grab at the end. But just to go through a few of these, date created. So on the side panel here, sorry, before I forget, this is the side panel. I've just scrolled down a little bit from the top. This is not the family view. This is the regular view. So date created is at the top. Then there's a title, a caption, a file name, and then you can see all of the additional fields down here. So date created, you might think, well, that's an easy one, right? It's the date the photo is taken. Well, not exactly. Because if you remember those scanned photos that I talked about, when those come into my Mylio library, the date created will show whatever date I scanned them with my camera. So if I scanned these yesterday, even though the photo was taken in 1910, this date right here will be yesterday's date. And you don't want that. So normally in this field, it should be the date the photo was taken or the date the document was created. So the 1900 census, maybe it was April 4th. So you want to put that date in here. And when I am making up dates, I always actually set the time to 12 a.m. And that's a little signifier to me that I know that this was probably a scanned photo or something downloaded and that I was estimating the date. Now, Mylio does have the ability to do fuzzy dates, which some people love. You can do by decade, you can do by year, you can just choose the one that is as close to what you know as possible. Because I'm a chronological thinker, I do work with a lot of photos. I don't use fuzzy dates all that often because that is one thing. If you use a fuzzy date and you export your photo, it does not keep the fuzzy date because other software has not yet caught up to Mylio and does not offer that. So I'm not exactly sure what it does, but I will always put an actual date. And if I don't know, I choose as close as I can with the year. I choose January 2nd. And that is actually because one of the first libraries that I worked on as a photo organizer, luckily it was a friend, so it wasn't an issue, but there were a whole bunch of things that were not dated. So I could tell they were winter and I was pretty sure the year. So I put January 1st. Well, then she texts me like a month later, and she says, oh, I love my library. It's amazing. But I just did a search for New Year's Day. And why do I have 3,000 photos on New Year's Day, most of which are not actually New Year's Day? And the reason? Because I used January 1st. So I learned my lesson. I now use January 2nd because nothing happens on January 2nd. Nobody ever searches for January 2nd. It's like the New Year's stepchild or something. So that's the way I do it. Or if it's summer, the photo looks like summer, I'll do August 1st or something like that. The other thing I'll do with dates is if I'm not sure what the date is, like, I'm not even sure that I'm close, I will put the word circa in the caption. I'll put the word, or I'll put CA in the file name. And that's a signifier to me, again, that I'm not really quite sure what that date really is. Some other issues for dates that I don't really go into here, but they're on my little cheat sheet if you want to grab that at the end. The title field right here is essentially like a newspaper headline, just short and sweet and to the point. It doesn't have to be perfect. So like this one, it says Bud Ward military portrait. That's not Bud Ward's entire name, but it's short. I know who it is. And that's how I handle the caption, or sorry, the title. The caption, this is where you put the who, the what, the where, the when, the story behind the photo. Now, Mylio, it has excellent facial recognition. So, you're thinking, why would I want the name there when I have it down here? The people tab will tell me. The reason I put the name here is because the people tab has pictures. It doesn't have the names. And I know who this one is, but there could be a number of photos where I'm not entirely sure. And if I just went to the people tab, at some point I identified it, but I might not remember. So I like to have the full name in the caption, or you could do it as a keyword, or you could not do it at all. But this is why I said it's important to be consistent. I also put the place often in there for the same reason, is I can scroll down to the places and open up the map and see where the photo is taken, but it's a lot easier to just have everything right here. So that's what I do. Then the file name, again, if you look up, how do I name my genealogy documents and what file name should I use? You will find some that suggest you should throw literally everything into that file name. I don't suggest doing that because the long file names tend to kind of get screwed up. Sometimes a file will corrupt. Sometimes, pieces of it somehow get lost. So a shorter name tends to work better. I found this happens more often on Windows machines than Macs, but it does happen. So I prefer a shorter name, but still has some key information that if all else is lost from the metadata, I've got the person's name, I have the date, and then I have, something about the photo. This part changes. This one says military here, but that part changes. I always put the date in the file name. The reason being that I have seen so many photos with the date stripped. And if it's in the file name, then that's fine, because when you sort of get it back, you can redate it to the right spot, and it's just a lot faster. So I always add the date and the primary person to the file name. If this was a census document, it would have the head of household as the name, the year of the census, and then probably census right here. And then keywords, I used to do a lot more with keywords because the programs I'm using did not have the AI OCR type features that Mylio has now. But I will still always put the record type. Is it a newspaper or that it came from? Is it a marriage document, a birth document, an obituary, a gravestone? I will put those in there. Sometimes locations occasionally will go in there if there's a reason for doing that. And again, if I have not put the people names in the caption, I will put them as a keyword because I like to be able to see it up top. But there's no right way necessarily, a wrong way of doing captions and keywords. Just be consistent, because if you're not, when you search, you aren't going to get the results that you are looking for. A few more fields. Mylio allows you to enter additional IPTC field data. And IPTC is the International Press Telecommunications Council. It is a standard that is used for all programs, the same fields, to keep information available from one photo to the next, from one program to the next. So all of the fields we just talked about are IPTC fields, but these are some additional ones. If you don't actually see this drop down in your Mylio under Smart Tags, go into your settings and advanced and toggle it on. I think by default it might be off, but if you toggle it on, you'll see all these additional fields. I'm not suggesting that you fill in all these fields, although you can if you want to. I don't tend to do that. I do a few. I always do the copyright, because that tells me where the photo or the document is coming from if I have it. So especially something like a newspaper, I might say, 1952-4-1 Boston Globe, page 7 or something, because that is where I found the information. I will also always use this copyright info URL. And this is where I copy and paste from the Ancestry slide. If you remember back to an earlier slide, that source information, I will sometimes copy and paste that into here. Some other useful creator I don't use much for Ancestry, but if you know who took the photograph, that could go here. And email I tend to use if the document that I have came from somebody else and they might know other things about it. I can drop their email in here as a way of reminding me, where did it come from? Moving on to people tag. One of the things I love most about Mylio is the facial recognition is killer. It is better than any program that I have used, and I have used several that I won't name, but it is really, really, really good. So I use it on my Ancestry documents, but there is an issue with, how do you name the people? So if you're my dog, who's right here, that's easy. He's Loki Freedman. He does not have any other names. That is it. So he's an easy one, but you only have 2 fields. You have first name and you have last name. If your person goes by a nickname, what do you do with that? If they, if you are my son, you have a nickname. So I need to put that somewhere. I will add it to the first name with quotations. If you are my husband, you actually go not by your first name, but your middle name. And so what would I do there? I need to indicate somehow that he doesn't go by his first name. He goes by his middle name. So I will capitalize the middle name so that I know. Obviously I'm not going to forget it's my husband, but if it was somebody else, I might. So I'll capitalize that so that I know that's a middle name and that's a go by name. For last names, you have to decide for women, how are you going to handle maiden names and married names? And there are a whole bunch of different conventions out there on that as well. What I do is the maiden name is listed in normal type, and I put married name, and if there's more than one, I add them in sequence in parentheses. But again, you have to have a cheat sheet, because what if you forget and you swap them and you said, oh, well, lots of people use maiden names in the parentheses, so I'm going to do that. Well, that's fine, but next time you see that person come up somewhere, you might not remember which is which. So make yourself a cheat sheet or use the one that I provide for you at the end. Titles, things like junior or senior or doctor, that kind of thing. I do use those, but I don't put them in here because of the sorting. I find it annoying. So I don't tend to put them in here, but I do put them somewhere else, which I will get to at the end. So again, consistency is key. Okay, now that I have everything in Mylio, I have gone through my inbox, I have added all of the information that I know about a photo or a document, then what do I do? So my inbox was the triage. If it's sitting in my inbox, it means it still needs something that I have. That's why it's in there. But what I'll do is once I've added everything that I know of, I will move that document or photo, in this case, into the Ancestry folder. And if it has all the information, great. Then it's done. I don't do anything else to it. It gets an Ancestry category because that's what the folder category is. If there's something I don't know that I want to follow up on, it gets a yellow flag. And the yellow flag tells me it's a to-do. I use the yellow flag throughout my library. So if I am going through my bird photos and some of them still need editing, that also gets a yellow flag because that way I remember yellow means to do. So I'm consistent across my library. I will then add a keyword telling me what kind of information I'm looking for. So these are some examples I use: data incomplete, data unknown, a sort of generic follow-up. If I'm using follow-up, I will also put a note in the caption telling me specifically what I need to follow up on. Where was this taken? Who else is in the photo? Who is this extra person? All of those things will go, that question will go in the caption. And I find this super useful because I will often sit down, I will say I'm researching for an hour, I download a whole bunch of stuff. I don't want to stop and make a separate to-do list right now. I just want to tag it and keep going. But at a later date, when I have some time to do additional research, I can just pull up this filter, and it's a quick filter in my collection for Ancestry and yellow, and I will find all my to-dos. I can then create a different list if I need to, or I can just work off of that. So I found it for super useful. Okay, so one last tip, and this is actually my favorite. It's a little bit random. I don't know if anybody else actually does this, but I have found it super useful. Mylio is not the ideal place to keep literally everything of your Ancestry research. As much as I love Mylio, that just does not make any sense. For example, relationships between people. Nobody wants to write out, this is so-and-so's great-great-great-grandfather's cousin's sister, whatever. You don't want to do that. So I actually keep my tree showing all of the relationships in Mac Family Tree because, as I mentioned earlier, I like to have something that is mine, that is downloaded on my machine. You can also keep those trees in Ancestry or in Family Search or wherever you want to do it. There's lots of programs. But I do like having key information available to me at all times. So I create what I call a master person photo, or in this case, a master puppy photo. And this is where I put all of the key information about a person that I want to have available. Why do I do it this way? For consistency, for one. I use the title field for the full name of the person, or in this case, pet, in the picture. So this is where I would add, if he was a doctor, say, and say he had a middle name and a nickname, all of that would go right here. So it might say Dr. Loki Meister Freedman, and that I will know is his actual full name. I stick master after it to remind me this is the master photo. But then when I'm working on my photos, I can pull this one up, I can copy the full name and stick it in the caption. And that way it is always consistent. I know it'll be the same every time I use it. And so I won't make mistakes. And I will know, for example, all of the, it's a maiden name, it's a married name, it's a nickname, all of that. In the caption, I will put the other key information, such as a birth date. This is kind of made up because he's a rescue, but it's close enough. Where he's from, some key events in his life. He was hit by a car a few years ago, who his friends are, key things I want to remember. I will put it in the category of master ancestry photo so I can find them quickly. I also actually have an album of a master person photo for each person in my Ancestry tree. And that way it's just one photo of that person, usually the best photo I can find with a clear face, or I just, my favorite photo. So I have one album of one person each so that they're easy to find and to review. It's actually quite fun to flip through them with other people. The other reason I do this is because I always have my phone with me. I don't always have my computer with me. So if I am somewhere and just happen upon some really cool record or something, and I need to quickly, make a connection somewhere and figure out who or what, I'll pull up the master person photo and use that information there. Okay, so that is my last random tip. I realized one thing I did not mention earlier, or maybe I did, but when you create your cheat sheet, hopefully you will, of your naming conventions, or you'll use mine, stick it in your library for the same reason, where you might not always have your computer with you, but you'll always have your phone, so you can pull that up at any time and use that naming convention and use the fields the way you want to and not forget. And I stick that in my reference section along with my warbler bird butts. They live side by side there so that it is always handy. And with that, that's it. That was a very superficial overview of what I do. Many sections in there. Could have been a half day talk, at least an hour. Naming alone, and we didn't even touch places, how you deal with that. Those could be full on conference talks, but hopefully I gave you an overview of what I like to do, how it works for me. If you want to connect with me, if you want to send me your genealogy tips, because I'd love to hear them. Like I said, I'm sure there's people on here who know more than me. I'd love to hear them. Send me an email. If you want a copy of my cheat sheets that I use every time I do research with examples, you can either go here or scan here and download that. And with that, I am done. So I am going to send it back to Lori.
Fantastic. I learned a lot. So this was a lot of fun. I hope everybody else gained a lot of tips from you as well. It sounds like it. We do have a couple questions for you.
Okay.
One is from Harold asking, does she use Mylio to organize clients' photos as a separate library? And if she does, how does she collect, organize, and pass them back to the clients?
Okay, so that is literally a whole other seminar. The very short answer is yes, I do. Not for all clients. I'm not a one size fits all. I actually work with Apple and a bunch of others, but my Mylio clients, where I think it fits, I do use Mylio to gather. I clean out, I hand it back to them, but it's a little bit of a complicated process, which I really don't have time to go into here, but I would suggest, if that's something that interests you, I see JC is on, and I'll throw him under the bus, and you can contact him and he can answer those questions for you.
Great.
I know nothing.
Oh, yes, he does.
He taught me everything I know about that. So
Deb is asking, where in Ancestry do you find where to download a document or photo to Mylio?
So in Ancestry, you literally just click on the document itself. So if you open up a record, I probably can't get back there quickly, but if you open up a record so that you can see it on your screen, on the upper right-hand side, there is a save photo, they call it photo, or it might say save document button. And once you click that, that will open up the download panel on your computer. I'm not sure how that works on mobile. I'm not sure I've ever tried it. Or there's the other way to do it on Ancestry is there's a wrench symbol on the side. When you're looking at the document, it'll be on your right-hand side. And if you click that, it gives you the options. And then once you click that, it should just open up a download panel there. And then you may or may, you probably have to find the Mylio and tell it to go there. Mine's automatically now set to do that, but it's quite simple.
Great. Brian is asking, how do you actually make that master photo?
Oh, it's very easy. So all I do is I flip through my library and find my favorite photo so that one was my dog. And then I just fill in the metadata fields, just like I would with anything else. So I open up the metadata panel on the right-hand side and add the title. I decide what the name is going to be. I, add all the caption, add any other information that I want. And then, like I said, I will add it as in my library, I make it a category, give it its own category of master ancestry photo. And I also put them in an album. So you handle it just like any other. There's nothing special about it.
Hey, Carla is asking, I have photos in folders on various computers and the folders are randomly named. Should I just import all the photos as is and rely on the keywords and cataloging that Mylio offers? Or is there a better way to initially organize photos before pulling them into Mylio?
So that is also, it could be an hour-long talk, but and I hate to say this, but the answer is it depends. So what I would do is I would go in there and, take a look at what the organization really is. Mylio will give you smart tags, is I think what it calls it, but as keywords, but it may not give you the keywords that you want. It's still, this is my personal opinion and I love Mylio, but it's still new. So things sometimes aren't properly named. They can help you get close, but they might not be quite right. So I would suggest looking at your photo structure. You may want to clean it up a little bit before you bring it in. The main reason I might do that is take a look at the dates. I don't like bringing a whole bunch of stuff into a library if the dates are wrong, because it just makes it a lot harder. If you go into a folder and you see all the dates are messed up, you might want to do some work on that first. But again, that is, it really depends on your specific situation. That's actually something people hire me to do all the time. And there's not a one size fits all on that one.
Okay. All right, looks like we're going to wrap this up. This has been a fantastic presentation. Thoroughly enjoyed it. And thanks everybody for joining us, Angela and JC as well. I really appreciate the cheat sheet you're making available for everybody, because what I've learned today is consistency is key, right?
Consistency is key, absolutely.
Yeah, and Mylio as well. Well, thank you very much. And hopefully we can have you on again sometime. It sounds like we have a lot more to talk about. So that would be fun.
There's a lot. Yes.
Thank
you so much. This was so much fun. I hope everybody learned something, and please send me your tips. I wasn't kidding about that. Take my email and send me what you've got.
Great. Okay. Thanks everybody. And thank you so much, Allison. We'll see you again.
Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.